Right now, as you are watching this, meteorologists in South Florida are pointing to something that sounds like good news on the surface, but is actually a warning sign underneath it. Thursday's high in Miami reached only 88 degrees, the coolest afternoon the city has seen in almost 2 months, thanks to widespread cloud cover and rain moving through the region. That should be the start of a welcome break from a brutal summer. Instead, forecasters are calling for a much drier weekend, a trend expected to continue right into next week, with highs climbing right back into the low to mid-90s and rain chances dropping to somewhere between 20 and 30%. The heat itself is not actually the story here. The story is what has been quietly happening underneath it. Florida's own National Weather Service forecasters have been warning for weeks that a strengthening El Nino event over the Pacific Ocean is now conditions on the other side of the country, and that the state's summer rainy season, the daily afternoon thunderstorms that normally define a Florida summer and provide the only real relief from the heat, could wind down earlier than usual this year. That means the heat that has been baking the state for months is not ending because a cooler, wetter pattern is replacing it. It is ending because the storms that normally interrupt it may simply stop showing up, replaced by something considerably drier. And in a state already watching wildfire risk climb in its own northeast corner, that is not a trade most residents should welcome. This is the story of why the end of Florida's heat this year could look nothing like it usually does, sourced directly from the National Weather Service's own outlook, not recycled headlines. Drop a comment and tell me how dry it has felt where you are in Florida this month, because the pattern behind this video is not showing up evenly across the state. If you want grounded weather breakdowns of vague headlines, subscribe. It is free, and a like helps this reach people who need to see this before their own local pattern shifts. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Thank you. Now let us get into it. To understand why this matters, you first need to understand what a normal Florida summer actually looks like, because the state's rainy season is not just background weather. It is the entire mechanism that keeps the heat survivable for months at a time. The National Weather Service's own South Florida office describes the wet season as unfolding in 3 fairly distinct phases each year. The first stretch, running from mid-May through early July, tends to be the stormiest, bringing strong winds, frequent lightning, and the heaviest flooding risk of the year. The second phase, running from early July through roughly mid-August, is typically the hottest, with the subtropical high-pressure system its greatest influence over the state, producing intermittent dry stretches and episodes of Saharan dust that actually dry and warm the atmosphere, even during what is supposed to be the wet season. It is that second phase Florida is sitting inside right now in the first week of August, and it is precisely the phase forecasters say is now being reshaped by a climate pattern with nothing to do with Florida itself. The mechanism driving this comes from thousands of miles away in the tropical Pacific Ocean. NOAA's own latest observations show sea surface temperatures in the central and eastern equatorial Pacific running more than 1 degree Celsius above average, confirming a moderate strength El Nino event actively underway. El Nino is best known to most people for how it reshapes winter weather across North America, but the pattern influences global atmospheric year-round, and one of its more specific effects is a tendency to suppress rainfall across Florida during the warm season by altering the position and strength of the very same subtropical ridge already dominating the state's weather in August. Several long range forecast models are now projecting below average precipitation across much of Florida for the second half of meteorological summer, a signal that lines up directly with the broader warm phase signature El Nino produces. Meteorologists tracking this pattern have been careful to note that South Florida's daily wet season rainfall is naturally highly variable, and that it typically takes an organized, large-scale weather system, whether a tropical wave, a broader, or an actual tropical storm, to produce heavy rainfall spread out over a wide area. When those organized systems fail to show up, which is precisely what a below-normal hurricane season tends to produce, the daily, scattered thunderstorms that would otherwise develop simply do not carry the same volume of rain, and the state can quietly slide toward drought even while sitting in the middle of what is supposed to be its wettest stretch of the year. That last piece of the puzzle is already playing out in real time. NOAA's most recent Atlantic hurricane season update, issued just yesterday, maintained its prediction for a below-normal season overall, projecting between 7 and 13 named storms for the full year with a 75% chance the season finishes below normal and just a 5% chance it finishes above normal. As of today, the entire Atlantic basin has produced only 2 named storms all season, Arthur and Bertha, and has not produced a single hurricane, an unusually quiet pace for a season already more than 2 months old. Both of those storms formed in the Gulf rather than developing from the kind of long-tracked tropical waves that typically deliver more widespread rainfall to Florida over the course of a full season. Fewer organized systems moving through or near the state means fewer opportunities for the kind of soaking, multi-day rainfall events that keep South Florida's water tables and vegetation moisture levels from sliding toward a drought, even as daily pop-up thunderstorms continue in isolated pockets across the peninsula. The consequences of that drying trend are not hypothetical. They are already visible in the northeastern part of the state. Drought conditions tied to this same pattern have already been linked to Florida's own railroad. Fire earlier this year in the northeast corner of the state. A wildfire that broke out specifically because vegetation moisture had already fallen well below what the region typically holds during what should be its wettest months. That fire is a fairly direct preview of what an early ending rainy season can produce statewide if the current pattern holds through the rest of August and into the traditionally drier stretch of early fall. Florida's own emergency and forestry agencies watch soil moisture and drought index readings closely for exactly this reason, because a summer that quietly underdelivers on its usual rainfall does not just mean a few extra sunny days at the beach, it means vegetation across the state entering the naturally drier winter months already moisture stressed. A combination that has historically set up some of Florida's more serious wildfire seasons in years when it has happened before. There is a genuinely useful comparison sitting inside how different parts of the state are experiencing this same underlying pattern. Shows this is not a uniform, statewide drought, so much as an uneven redistribution of an already unpredictable rainy season. South Florida, including Miami, is still catching enough scattered storm activity to produce genuine short-term relief, like Thursday's rain-driven cooldown, even as the broader seasonal trend points drier. Northeast Florida, where the railroad fire already broke out, is sitting in a more consistently dry stretch, with less of that scattered storm relief showing up at all. That unevenness is exactly what meteorologists mean when they describe El Nino's influence on Florida rainfall as a below-average signal rather than a guaranteed drought, since the actual outcome on the ground still depends heavily on whether any organized systems happen to track close enough to specific regions to deliver a meaningful rain event before the pattern fully locks in. So what does this actually mean for you, wherever you happen to be watching this from? If you live anywhere in Florida, the practical takeaway is that a cooler, wetter stretch like Thursday's brief break in Miami should not be read as the start of a lasting change in the pattern, since forecasters are already calling for drier conditions to return within days and to persist into next week. Paying attention to your own local drought index and burn ban notices over the coming weeks, rather than assuming Florida's usual afternoon thunderstorms will keep showing up the way they have in past summers, is a genuinely useful habit sitting directly inside this exact forecast. If you live outside Florida, but know people who live there, checking in on whether their part of the state is seeing the wetter or drier side of this uneven pattern is a fair, specific question worth asking, since the answer genuinely varies from Miami to Jacksonville right now. The honest, grounded summary is this. The heat baking Florida this summer is not being replaced by a cooler, wetter pattern the way it normally would be by early August. It is being replaced by a drier one, driven by a strengthening El Nino event that is suppressing the organized storm systems Florida's rainy season depends on, reflected directly in an Atlantic hurricane season that has produced only 2 named storms and 0 hurricanes so far this year. That shift has already contributed to drought conditions and at least 1 wildfire in the northeast part of the state, even as pockets of South Florida continue to catch enough scattered rain for short-term relief like this week's brief cool down in Miami. The heat is ending in the sense that the pattern behind it is shifting, but what replaces it is not the relief most Floridians are used to. We are going to keep tracking this as El Nino's influence on the rest of hurricane season becomes clearer, sourced the same way we did today, straight from NOAA's own outlooks and the National Weather Service forecasters actually explaining the mechanism behind it, not recycled headlines. Subscribe so you do not miss the next update, because how this pattern resolves over the next several weeks will likely determine how Florida's fall drought risk shapes up. And leave that comment below. Tell me whether your part of Florida has felt drier than usual this summer, because the pattern behind this video is genuinely uneven, and your own answer helps fill in a picture forecasters are still piecing together in real time. Because behind every one of these forecasts is a firefighter in Northeast Florida who already fought 1 drought-driven wildfire this year, a family in Miami enjoying 1 cooler afternoon without knowing it is likely the exception rather than a new trend, and a hurricane season 3 months in that has stayed quiet for reasons that are turning out to have real consequences on land, not just at sea. 5,000 likes on this one. Let us go. See you in the next one.